All recording, all good? All right, so the theme we picked to do was permaculture without the permanent. We've been market gardening for about 4 years and gardening for a lot longer than that, but never in our own space. It's always been in someone else's yard or in a rental or container gardens or leasing some land to market garden on. So as much as we love the idea of permaculture, it's not something we've ever been able to practice in its entirety because we've never had the chance to plan for the future of trees and things that we won't be there for or we don't have permission to grow. So a lot of the techniques and approaches and philosophies we've adapted in our own way to the unique scenarios that we've been in, and we're hoping that we could share some of that with you guys.
Yay.
And a big focus on agroecology and like the garden ecosystem, because that's something that really interests both of us.
Cool.
Yeah. All right, so in the pictures, Lauren and myself and my brother James, who's not currently growing with us at the moment, but he's put in a lot of effort and helped us to get to where we are today. We have started our farm in Curry, and it's about at the 2-year stage, would you say?
Yeah, almost 2 years.
Yeah, so it was a very difficult first year with the incredibly wet weather. But this season, it's really felt like things are starting to come together and the soil's healthy, the plants are doing really well. And yeah, that's on the land of the Wanneroo people.
And will you have to leave that place as well?
Eventually, yeah, that's a lease at the moment. We're able to extend that, but we'll know that one day we will have to pack it up and move elsewhere. So that's informed a lot of our design decisions.
Yeah, sure.
Unfortunately, at the previous site, we knew that that would also be temporary. So a lot of our infrastructure we designed to be modular, that it can be picked up and taken with us and like set up.
Irrigation and things like that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Hopefully that can.
So there's a few ways that I think permaculture principles really can help temporary spaces, and especially situations where you want to get started and utilize the resources and the fertility around you, especially in situations where if you're renting, you probably can't fork out a huge amount of money to get started growing food, but principles such as recycling nutrients and minimizing waste and doing what you can with the resources at hand is exceptionally useful. I really like that small gardens and even temporary gardens can really bolster local ecosystems.
Yeah, that benefits an entire area.
Yeah, and it might be small, but it all makes a difference if that's just a little stopping point where a few different species can get some food to eat or stop and get some shelter in the shade or browse for insects. It all makes a big difference in a suburban landscape where it might be empty backyards for streets and streets. We've both experienced a lot of personal benefits in the health and mindfulness that comes with approaching a garden from a permaculture mindset. There's lots of observation and lots of planning and lots of connectedness with what you're growing.
Yeah, you learn a lot about the local ecosystem as well.
Yeah, and the way that you think about problems.
Yeah.
It's not something that a problem, there's a product that you need to buy to fix it. Like, what product do I spray? You try and really understand the processes at play and what's influencing that, at what point has it gotten out of control and why that may be. And then that is where you can intervene and change your methods to help create a balanced system. And of course, if you're ecologically focused, that very much aligns with permaculture principles in that we don't want to be taking away from finite resources. We don't want to be contributing to destructive practices. We want to give back as much as we're taking away, and if not more, giving back more. Anything else you wanted to say on that one?
On that slide.
So we've used all three of these setups. I started container gardening, just a few pot plants, and there are limitations in that, especially soil ecology, because it's a very finite volume of soil and it's also isolated from plant to plant. But I found that you can really connect a container garden ecosystem through composting and methods like mulching with the trimmings and prunings and leaves of the plants in there and mixing them around a bit. In that way, you're spreading the soil biology around and making sure you recycle that through like a good composting or vermicomposting system.
I personally don't think it's too bad to like leave a lot of cuttings from plants that you may trim in the yard, just like next to the plant it came from, because then they're just recycling their nutrients. Like, I guess it depends, like if it's pretty diseased, that's another story, but yeah, I think
so you just
okay.
chop and drop.
Yeah, chop and drop.
Yeah,
it's a pretty, I think it's pretty well known.
Yeah, it's used a lot with trees,
Yeah,
fruit trees and things, but even smaller plants, like if you prune chilies or eggplants and you're thinning them out or pruning low hanging branches, using that as mulch on the same plants, or covering up patches nearby that the soil might be exposed.
Yeah.
And in that way, you're kind of spreading out the organic matter.
Yeah. So I was reading about the like soil chemistry a while ago, and just like over time, if more matter is taken away from like an area, the soil gradually becomes more acidic. So it does help reduce like soil acidity. So you don't have to keep adding like things like, I guess in big like agricultural industry, for example, how they add lime and things.
Yeah,
you don't have to.
Closer.
Is it picking me up?
I might be a bit louder if you wanted to hear that. I mean, hold it, sorry.
I'm a bit softer spoken.
And container gardens are great, especially in like short-term rentals, because you can literally pick it up, put it in the back seat of a car or borrow a ute or something and take your plants with you. Whereas in the raised bed or in the ground, you really rolling the dice if you have to dig something up to transplant it, but a lot of it you're just going to lose. But there are more benefits in terms of stability with growing in the ground. It's a large soil ecosystem that is living, teeming with life, and you're only bolstering that with the addition of cultivation practices and adding organic matter and nutrients. So you can really tap into that soil food web that's already there. And there's a lot less need for input nutrients in if you grow directly in the ground. Yeah. And they're suited to different kinds of spaces.
Yeah, I guess it really depends on what's available to you. So
yeah.
Yeah. I think we both personally like the in the ground method.
Yeah.
A bit more. Yeah.
Because if we were market gardening at a scale that we are and they were all raised beds, it'd be a massive effort to set it all up, but then also a massive effort to take it down or move it. And importing the amount of soil you need to fill that volume can be a problem. So we'll start talking about the garden ecosystem. The fundamental part of any ecosystem is the microbiology. It's absolutely incredible how much there is to know about microbiology and how understudied it is and really underappreciated by all of us in agriculture, even in science. I read a fact today that there's more living organisms in a teaspoon of soil than there is humans on the planet. So over 8 billion.
That's wild.
And they perform a huge variety of functions in the soil, from providing structure to breaking down nutrients, breaking down organic structures that other decomposers can't, like fungi and actinomycetes, or I can't really pronounce it, but they're the only two that can actually break down lignin and a lot of chitin, and those compounds would just accumulate otherwise.
And they make a lot of nutrients plant available as well.
Yeah,
yeah,
especially from the digesting of other microorganisms, like protozoa nematodes will eat bacteria and eat fungi and then digest that, and their secretions are then a plant available form of those nitrogen and whatever else that they're composed of.
Yeah.
Got a few pictures. That's rhizobium bacteria nodules on legumes, and that's a beneficial association between certain family of plants and a certain families of bacteria, where they metabolize atmospheric nitrogen in exchange for carbon in the form of sugars. So it makes the atmospheric nitrogen in the air accessible to plants, which it isn't otherwise.
Something I just thought of a random fact I found out today as well.
Yeah, sure.
Apparently, the stinging nettle weed is a really good indicator of like high nitrogen content in the soil. So apparently you can, like, if you turn it into a weed tea, you can make like a really good fertilizer. But you've got to dilute it apparently. So yeah. I don't know, just random fact.
What else? This is agar plates from garden soil that was in a study that we were reading. That's soil under a microscope. So there's the particles of dead organic matter, but all of these kind of transparent shapes are living microorganisms. It's, yeah, really fascinating.
Yeah. There's so much life in the soil.
So we've categorized all these parts of a garden ecosystem basically by what their function is, and a lot of that is determined by what they eat and then the role that they play in the garden. And so another type, they're not technically decomposers like a lot of microorganisms are, but detritivores. I say in gardening forums and stuff, they're very misunderstood by a lot of people. These are creatures that pretty much exclusively eat dead or dying plant matter. They're not garden pests. Obviously the worms, but lots of people do misunderstand woodlice and cockroaches and often accuse them along with millipedes of actually eating their plants and being garden pests, whereas they are only the service they perform in the ecosystem is to consume dead organic matter and break it down. So yeah, they do a really good job of that. They're really good to have in your garden. And if they are eating your plants, that plant is already dying. It's not a living plant.
Also, isopods in particular are pretty good at breaking down heavy metals. So yeah, they do kind of fill that role as well with like the health of a soil and ecosystem.
They are the roly-polies, like the spiders.
Yeah, so
that kind of
woodlice,
class of
that class.
arthropods. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's all sorts. This is just some highlights. There's definitely more detritivores than this. And there's hundreds and hundreds of species of cockroaches that don't invade houses. Not all cockroaches are bad or house human pests. It's just given a bad rap by those few that do get into people's houses.
Yeah, there's certainly some really like pretty native cockroaches I've seen. They're usually very small, but they've just like got a really nice metallic sheen on their wings. Yeah.
So the next class is ones that are very kind of well known in the garden, and it's the herbivores. Invertebrate herbivores make up the majority of garden pests for most people, and they're not evil critters, but they're just specialized at eating plants, which is what we're trying to keep alive. And the main kind of herbivores that we have is the gastropods, which is slugs and snails. Bugs in the Hemiptera family, they have a sucking mouth part called a proboscis, and they use that. There's some that are carnivores, but the herbivorous Hemiptera use the sucking mouth part to suck sugars out of plants, and you'll often find them around the lush growing tips and flower buds and that sort of thing. So they include your shield bugs, your aphids, your scale, stink bugs, all that sort of stuff. Grubs and caterpillars, usually just the larvae of moths and butterflies. And there's particular species that target certain types of plants, and a lot of the common garden pests are certain species of moth and caterpillar. And then the larvae of some other moths and beetles and flies tunnel through the just under the surface of the leaves of plants to protect themselves, and they're known as leaf miners. So you can see here the little grub has eaten a tunnel through the plant. I see them a lot on citrus especially, but they get into all sorts of plants.
Do you have methods for ridding yourself of too many of these? Yeah, it depends what it is, but we believe a lot in integrated pest management, and that pests are best controlled through a balanced ecosystem.
Yeah, so like encouraging the predators to live in the area and keep their populations down.
Yeah, because each one of these things, there's going to be animals that are specialized in eating them. And if you can keep a population of the predators in your garden, whenever these guys pop back up, there's going to be something ready to eat it. Whereas if you spray and kill indiscriminately, you might wipe out all the pests, but then there's no food for your pest predators, and they're not going to stay and live in that little garden ecosystem that you've got. So next time a moth flies over and wants to lay eggs, there's going to be absolutely no competition for them, and there's going to be no pressure of predation, and they're just going to explode. We'll go into it a bit later, but there is science that pest and predator populations work in cycles. They're a little bit offset, but if there's a surge in one, it'll shortly be followed by a surge in the other, and then they'll die back, and then they'll move on and die back. So next class of invertebrates is pollinating insects. That the main function, or like the function that we're touching on here, is the transfer of pollen for the fertilization of a lot of plants, and flowering plants make up the vast majority of things that we want to grow in a garden. All fruits and vegetables that we consume.
A lot of people focus on bees as the main pollinators, but there's a surprising amount of other insects that are just as important, like wasps and ants and butterflies and moths. And while honeybees kind of get all the credit, there's
a massive number of other different types of social bees and then solitary bees that they might have different feeding characteristics that might mean that they have a more successful rate of pollination, or they might pollinate a further distance than honeybees.
Oh, there's also flies as well. Flies are actually, like, some species are pollinators as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think I put a picture of a fly up there.
No.
Wasps too?
Yeah, wasps. Yeah, I did mention that. They're surprisingly good at it.
Yeah, because in their adult stage, they'll eat pollen for energy, but when they raise their young, they'll feed them insects. So wasps are really cool in that they fill multiple ecological roles in their different life stages.
Dual purpose.
Yeah. Yeah, as Loz said, ants are actually surprisingly good pollinators. They like certain types of flowers, but they do definitely just walk all through them, collecting pollen and looking for other insects.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot more study to be done on ants and their ecological functions. So I've got invertebrate predators next. So some well-known ones in the predatory beetle families. Ladybirds, obviously the most well-known, but I've put up here, I think it might be a tiger beetle, or a lot of the ground beetles that don't fly are really aggressive predators, and they're really, really good. There's also a wasp sharing that meal with that beetle there. Types of flies, hover flies are a great predator. In their larval stage, they eat a lot of insects.
Yeah, they eat a lot of decaying matter as well.
Yeah,
I believe, because they're waterborne when they're in their larval stage.
Yeah,
I believe. Yeah,
and they also pollinate in the adult stage. Trachnid flies are a type of parasitic fly, lay their larvae inside soft-bodied insects and kill them that way.
Is that what the
I think they're wasp eggs, but they do the same thing in that they lay their eggs on the back of a soft-bodied insect and the larvae emerge and consume it.
yeah, they just burrow into it. Kind of scary.
Yeah. Lacewings, this is a lacewing nymph. This particular species carries all the chitin and corpses of its victims on its back for protection. But you can say it does a great job of eating all sorts of different things. But they're a beautiful net-shaped wing on the lacewings. Yeah, what else is there? Spiders.
And mantids,
Yeah, centipedes, ants. Anything that you see that's killing another bug is probably also going to be eating your garden pests.
Yeah.
It's assassin bug up there.
Oh, yeah.
So these guys, I think, are some of the heavy lifters in your garden. Go unnoticed a lot of the time, but make a massive difference in the population.
That dragonflies and damselflies.
Oh, yes.
They eat mozzies, I believe, but do they pollinate, or are they more just eating their predators?
They're more predators, I believe. They're not so much like pollen eaters or anything. They mainly predate on other insects.
In their larval stage, they're aquatic, and they eat a lot of mosquito larvae, but they also eat small fish and tadpoles and things like that. But that's what they do in the ecosystem. But adult, dragonflies and stuff are great aerial predators and can snatch other insects midair. Yeah,
they're like 90% successful with their hunts compared to a lot of land animals, which are around 20 to 30% in their success rate.
Yeah, call them the fighter jets of the animal world. So birds in the garden were very important because this is moving further up the food chain of predators, and birds are great because if you are in an isolated space and you have a garden that's isolated, birds can quickly visit, and it doesn't take a long time for birds to learn to frequent your space.
Yeah. And they do become quite like accustomed to you quickly, so
yeah. So
yeah.
One of my favorites is a small insect-eating birds. They're very swift and agile, and they're great at catching moths and grasshoppers and all that mid-flight. They'll jump around in the grass and wait for something to jump up and chase after them, which is great. There's larger birds, like very common in urban areas, like magpies and ravens. Eat a lot of insects, but then also can eat some larger prey. Like I've seen a magpie take a baby rat. Definitely seen kookaburras take adult rats almost as big as they are.
Yeah, back at the Carter farm, I definitely saw a kookaburra taking one of the rats that was around. And yeah.
And then shrikes, like our butcher birds in Australia, eat large insects, but also eat small rodents and things like that, which is really helpful to maintain a balance. And then large predatory birds. So if your garden's big enough for large rats or large, like I guess even getting up to rabbits and things like that.
Smaller marsupials.
Yeah. Owls and eagles and other raptors do a great job of keeping their populations under control. And mention that, I guess some birds can be destructive and become a bit pesty in the garden. Definitely had cockatoos pull out plants just for fun, eat lots of sunflowers and just tear things up.
We like to use the sunflowers as a cover crop for a lot of the beds we're starting, because it can be a good distraction for a lot of the pest, like the birds that decide to rip out things.
Yeah, the sacrificial sunflowers.
Yeah, the copies of it. In my case, I've got a small mandarin tree, and they'll sit on the fence. So I had this almighty ruckus one day, and I went there's about 20 of them, and they'd all grab one. Mandarin, come out of it, put it down. I've got another one.
Yeah,
they don't eat it all. They just throw it.
I ended up netting it through.
At one of the houses we used to live at, there was a mandarin tree next door. Kookaburras would grab the mandarin, sit on the power line. Oh, sorry, cockatoos grab the mandarin, sit on the power line above my car, eat half of the mandarin and drop the rest on the top of my car. So forever we wake up with mandarin peels and whatnot on top of the car.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
I think that's all.
So your reptiles and amphibians also really important in the garden, especially blue tongues and other types of skinks are some of the only specialized predators of gastropods. So if you've got slug and snail problems, it might be a really good idea to try and create some habitat for lizards in particular.
Yeah, they love like rocks and sticks, and usually like having a pool of water nearby is good for them, and like long grasses as well,
and a pool that they can climb out of so they don't drown. It's really important. Frogs eat an incredible amount of insects every single night for their size. They're voracious little predators and absolutely adorable. So we're very blessed to have lots of frogs at Curry where we grow, so we see a few pretty much every day. That's a photo from our farm.
That little dwarf green tree frog.
You have to have water around, don't you?
Yeah. So we've got a nearby pond, but then we've also made a little frog pond just in the beds to give them somewhere to stop off at. And they've spawned in there a number of times now.
Since we've been at Curry, we've gradually noticed the lizard population has increased. Like when we were first there definitely wasn't really any water skinks or anything, and now I just see them all the time. So
because previous to us growing, there was no cover, it was all grass. It was just a kind of big grassy lawn, and if there's no cover for reptiles, they will just get taken by birds.
Yeah.
So you really do need to provide bushy areas or places for them to hide, rocks, and because they need a pretty safe path to be able to travel between areas.
Yeah. And we also we've seen red bellies around, and like they're fine as long as we leave them alone. Like, yeah. And also there's a tree snake. Apparently Bala can attest to this. He's seen the snakes in little baby tree snakes in his basil. I think it was his basil plant.
That wasn't the basil plant.
I think I've seen one brown snake too, but the red bellies seem to help keep rodents under control, which I'm very appreciative of. I think they're in our next slide. So this is larger plant eaters that can often be pesky too, and they're definitely, you want to control through discouraging them or excluding them from the garden, because they're kind of getting to the size where they can cause real damage to your plants, and it's quite nasty to have to intervene and kill them or whatever other management.
We try we don't like to use poison or bait, because that can just go back into the ecosystem and potentially harm other creatures. But generally we tend to let them do their thing unless it gets too out of hand.
Just focus on trying to take away the really easy food and nesting places for them.
Like putting our seeds in like containers that they can't break into.
So I'll get into anything rodents, but this year we've learnt that wallabies and kangaroos can eat a lot of garden plants.
And they're probably worse than the rodents, to be honest, at the moment.
Quite a bit bigger, but that's okay. They're a lot easier to keep out with a fence than rats are.
We haven't had any rabbit issues, which is nice. They don't seem to be in the area too much.
No. Because I think we do have foxes, and we've got, in the last couple of weeks, we've had big wedge-tailed eagles circling around, so might be a scary place to be a rabbit. Where we're going, so I know people do struggle with them in their veggie gardens. As we touched on a little bit earlier, there's a lot of garden pests, and I guess over the different seasons we've dealt with lots of different ones specifically having problems with them, but it's always seemed that the best solution is to really focus on how your design is affecting these pests, and whether you've made it really easy for them to hone in on plants they particularly favour, if you've got them all in one area or lined up in a row, or if all of those plants are suffering nutrient deficiencies, they're a lot more susceptible to certain pests. For example, like the sucking Hemiptera particularly favour weak plants with thin cell walls that they can easily pierce through and suck the nutrients out of, whereas healthy plants will give them a lot harder time to get a good feed.
I suppose that's why interplanting with various species can be like pretty useful in either deterring pests or just making it harder for them to get to their favourite plants.
So always be there, but if you can stop them jumping from one plant to the next plant to the next plant, I like to think of it in terms of their senses. Like some insects will have specialist eyesight, seeing in different spectrums of light and UV or infrared, and they're looking for specific plants and leaf shapes and signatures. And some insects will use scent and odor and pheromones to lock in on where they want to feed. But if you can break up the plants and create visual barriers and create confusing smells in the ecosystem, it's going to be a lot harder for them to completely dominate. And it'll give you a lot more time in those pest cycle fluctuations for the predators to catch up, because hopefully they'll be around and looking for food also.
Yeah. There's something I was going to say, but I've forgotten.
There's like, in ecology, there's a physical limit to pest populations. They can't exceed the amount that they're able to eat, and they're also limited by the predatory pressure that they face, and that goes for animals in all parts of the food chain. So in your microbiology, there's lots of predators, there's lots of decomposers, there's pathogens, but a stable ecosystem will keep them in a balance. And you do want a population of all to exist at any one time, because there'll be no, if you have no pathogens in your soil, there's going to be no predators of the pathogens, so that if an anaerobic situation takes place and manure is spread, the pathogens could explode out of control in an isolated pocket and cause even like a human to get sick from it. But having a healthy microbiome in the soil really stops them getting out of control, because there's the constant competition and pressure that they face in population.
Definitely found one of the best practices for pest management is just to, let the ecosystem do its thing, really. And like boosting it by planting certain things like we've talked about is good and fine and everything, but generally just leaving it alone seems to be one of the better options. What do you agree?
Yeah, I think dramatic interference into pest issues doesn't seem to be the right solution. You can do minor interferences, like you could squash a few bugs here and there, or toss a few caterpillars into the chook pen, but I don't think the right solution is to just cut down an entire crop and burn it or something dramatic like that. Because you want a stable ecosystem, and in order to have a stable ecosystem, you do have to sometimes have losses, and you have to let the pests go sometimes so that there can be a healthy predator population.
I think like truly sustainable growing, I think definitely involves some form of like loss to pests and things like that.
Definitely, if there's any specific questions at the end, fire away, but that's the main substance that we had for our presentation. And what we do, as we said, is we're market gardeners. We grow vegetables, do stuff like this, talk to people. It's our social media stuff.
If you want to check us out, but don't have to.
How do you do the boxes? To people?
We do veggie boxes, and we've started trying to sell direct to cafes and things again.
Seems to be a bit of a surge in the area of sustainable little cafes, because I think with Newcastle being so big, a lot of young people are buying, or if they can buy houses, they're buying out in kind of Maitland, Cessnock area. It's kind of interesting to see that, that shift.
It's like it's a bit of urban growth going on out there. Seems to be spreading out west a bit more.
I've got a small, just ordinary urban garden, and I've got a compost heap and a little worm farm, which are reasonably successful. One thing I haven't been able to deal with, and I didn't know if you had any experience with this, you know, you get sort of meat products and trimmings and bones and that sort of stuff. I got one of these little Japanese things where you're supposed to put it in and spray. Bokashi, that's the one. And it was a disaster. It used to stink to high heaven. And yeah, and it wasn't a success for me. Yeah. Have you any thoughts on any methods for sort of handling that type of stuff to try and get the nutrients out of it without it becoming a nuisance?
Yeah. So we've done a few different approaches because, yeah, we've had meat products where you occasionally fish and discard of the fish frames and bones and organs. And
yeah, so we have started burying them, like digging I don't know, 50 centimeter hole or something, kind of near our like garden beds or near trees, near
not close to vegetables, but closer to
more to like the like the native kind of habitat beds, or just out on the near the other trees and things.
So if burying's an option and you can get it deep enough that it's not going to be dug up by a fox or what we did was we saved up a volume in the freezer to bury all at once, or we've also buried like a fish frame or bits of bone or meat in the bottom of a deep pot. And it'll get in there. And we've also added some meat products into big fermentation barrels that we've done. So it's an anaerobic fermentation in a big volume of water. But at the end of it, there's no sign that it's putrefied or there's any kind of difference.
There's no like rotting smells or anything when we have fermented them.
It wasn't a massive volume, but we've tried it with manures, but we've tried it with like poultry blood and feathers and organs, maybe. Organs.
So in other words, you're making it like a fertilizer tea. With the bones.
As a part of it, we use a lot of weeds and plant matter in there as well.
So it's primarily vegetable matter, plant matter.
But a little bit of that.
But I think that might be the trick to it, just dispersing little bits of animal product or meat that you've got in bones with a lot of vegetation and so it's not all just clumped together. So I think that's when it starts to go putrid and all those things.
Once you get some of the nose, it's
rotting meats, definitely the odor quite offensive.
Same with any like if we've seen any dead wildlife or anything, end up just burying it or something that's nearby.
I was gonna say, we have put small amounts in like a big hot compost. I do not know what that is. I was curious to know the citrus leaf miner. So I'm very much like live in the garden generally, partly laziness, but partly like just let it do the things. But the citrus leaf miner, like I know you can spray stuff, but I don't tend to. So I was curious, you said there are some natural predators. I was wondering what they are. And
it would be
off the top of my head.
The main predators would be ones that are predating on their adult stages, and a lot of them are small moths and flies or beetles. So if you can leave spider webs around your citrus, it'd probably help a bit. But with leaf miners, since they are so protected in their larval stage, they're ones that we do interfere with a little bit, either squash them if you can see them with your finger,
or just take the leaf off
and we'd put it in the ferment. Because adding it into a compost, there's still a chance it'll complete the life cycle.
They But yeah, that's what I do. I sometimes just take the worst of the leaf off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd be bad, kind of put it in green, which I guess is the same thing, but that's just removing it from my system and putting it in something else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. But it'll probably end up dying in the green bin, I'd say, like, especially if it can't, like, find any more food once it's,
if you could be bothered, you could scald them with hot water if you wanted to compost it at home. But yeah,
do a mini ferment if you don't do large scale.
With that, those sort of grubs, we found having poultry is really good because it helps break up the pest cycle. So especially for things that are particularly difficult to deal with, like fruit fly, if there's fruit fly maggots in, say, a tomato that's dropped, throwing that in with the chickens is a really good way of stopping them completing the life cycle, because in a compost pile, they're just going to grow anyway, or even if you try and toss it far away, or they might even turn into flies by the time your green bin's taken out next and just fly out next time you open it up.
Yeah, there's definitely not an easy way to deal with pests. I think it's probably always going to involve some work.
But again, with the fruit fly, like
or just letting things do their thing.
If you adapt your practices, such as always picking up discarded fruit and not letting them complete the life cycle, that's one of the best ways to control them. Whereas things like little frogs will help keep it under control, but if you really need your crop of tomatoes, and fruit fly can very quickly spoil that, they're the times you might intervene and do something minor, like adjusting your practices.
Or plant more to account for the ones who will lose.
And spread them around and try different things like exclusion netting, or different strong odored plants can sometimes make it difficult for them to find. I find they thrive when there's poor airflow around tomatoes as well. So if the leaves are covered up or sitting near the ground, it's a really safe spot for the adult fly to get in and lay eggs without any threat of being predated upon. But if it's just out in the open, it's kind of fair game for any sort of predator in the area.
Any other questions?
I was just curious, what was your background? What did you do before you did market gardening?
So my background was, I actually did I did a degree in biotechnology, so somewhat related, like the science side of things. And I was working in that industry for a bit, but then Matt found Feedback Organic, which is when we were working with David, and then that's how I got into it. So would you like to explain?
My background before was straight out of school. I did electrical engineering and I hated it, and after a few years I decided I wanted to do conservation, and I just really got fascinated by sustainable agriculture and how productive systems can intermingle and work with natural environments, and that got me more into market gardening, but with a specific focus on sustainability. And I think I kept a lot of that love of ecology and native species from that.
We both already had a love of gardening already, so it was definitely something we were interested in. I don't know, just kind of naturally kind of progressed over time. Just from our interests.
Just kept wanting to do it bigger and get more plants and do different things, and then became a full-time thing. So, we just really liked it.
I don't know, just everything lined up. So
when you go in pots and you finish the crop, do you completely empty the soil and start again, or do you do you take that soil into your recycling and start with fresh?
I'll get you to repeat it.
Yeah, I'm interested when you're grown in pots and you finish the crop, do you completely replenish the soil or do you just feed it? Or do you have a strategy for that?
So if it's a large volume pot, I would treat it like I'd treat a garden bed, and I would take out or harvest the plant and top dress the soil. So replenish, like it will need a replenishment of nutrients if you've taken out from the system. But I believe in you feeding in the top, and then that'll break down similar to a forest floor where the fresh nutrients is deposited on top, and there's different stages of decomposition. And in a large volume pot, I wouldn't want to disturb all the hard work the microorganisms have done living in there. So I would just try and plant into there, feed the top. If it's a small volume pot, we would either put it through the worm farm or put it through the compost, but we'd always reuse it unless there was a specific pathogen that was really bad in that pot, like a plant disease or some fungus that you really needed to exclude. But I'd always try and replenish it somehow. And yeah, we reuse potting mix all the time.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does, thanks. Yeah.
I didn't have anything to add to that.
Yeah. I guess there's also situations where if you wanted to adjust its composition, like if it wasn't draining well enough, you might add more drainage material in which you might take it out and mix through sand or gravel, or if it's particularly clay, you might want to mix in organic matter or something like that. But if it's well performing and seems like a stable, happy little ecosystem, I don't really see a reason to disturb it in there.
I remember, did you talk about our beds, what we do when we finished a crop in them?
Oh yeah, we could. So we predominantly grow in ground.
Yeah.
And we practice no-till growing, so very focused on minimizing soil disturbance. And we try and think about that we're really growing healthy soil, because healthy soil will grow healthy plants.
Yeah.
So
for things like annuals that we have in the bed, we'll generally either, like, say they're a plant like a tomato or an eggplant, we'll generally chop them at the base and leave the roots and the kind of stump in place, just to not disturb the soil too much.
Yeah.
And we'll usually compost the leaf litter and everything, and then go and like transplant things into the bed, and over time it'll break down.
Yeah, wherever we can, we'll try not to disturb.
Yeah.
So we'll do a lot of the time just cut the plant off at the base if we want to remove the plant and let, as Lauren was saying, all the roots decompose in situ, because that's an important part of the, I guess, the digestive processes and returning those nutrients back into the soil.
And it's good habitat for a lot of insects as well.
Not to mention like the physical holding together of all of the soil, because if you completely clear the bed, it's very vulnerable to erosion. But if you've got all those plant roots still in there, or even in your pot plants, and then you get a big rain event, those roots are going to help keep the soil all together and not wash out the bottom of your pot or run down the footpath and out of your garden.
For things like radishes and things, we usually do. We sometimes leave some things in the bed to decompose while we're still harvesting from that bed. But at the end of the like once they've become like too big and like woody or something, we will end up fermenting, or taking all the plants out and fermenting them or composting. And then just putting like some more, like a compost layer back on top and replanting our next crop.
What about chooks? Do you ever, turn the chooks loose on your spent beds?
Not at the moment. They're not free range. Bala can probably tell you more about the chickens.
Yeah, I think we would in some situations if we could fence them in, but we just don't have the ability to fence off one bed at a time.
They do scratch and dig around all the other plants and a bit destructive.
Yeah, chickens perform like a lot of good things in the garden, but they do disturb the soil a lot. At the moment, we feed them a lot of scraps. They have a big run, but we put in a lot of weeds that have gone to seed or rotting fruit or infested leaves, things like that.
And we've used their like broken down manure as fertilizer. So
yeah.
Can you just talk about your fermentation? The volumes and how long you ferment for and stuff like that.
Yeah, you probably know the numbers.
So we've got these big plastic drums. I think they're probably 120 liters, maybe.
I think so. I can't remember off the top of my head, but they're big barrels.
Yeah. And we will, for a period of time, just put in weeds and different bits and pieces to fill it with dry stuff first. It's particularly great at destroying rhizomes and plants that propagate through runners and seeds. So those weeds that are really annoying to resprout in your compost, or because they resprout in your compost, the fermentation will kill them completely.
Yeah. So once we're filled with the like grasses and
grass seeds and
we
cooch runners and things like that.
We generally add like either rainwater or the water from one of our ponds, which is under our wash station. So we use that water because the chlorinated water will make the fermentation process take a little longer. If we use tap water. So we just use water that's been sitting around. And pretty much fill it to almost the top. Like
if you want to cover everything,
try and cover it all.
And we might get a stick or something and push it all under the surface.
So how long do we leave it again? Once we've done that,
it varies based on the season and the temperatures, but it needs to be burped or mixed around every day or so. So
times a week maybe.
Everything will float because of the gases given off. So you kind of need to push it all back down and let the gases float away, I suppose. But you just keep doing that, and without adding anything more. Once it's all together, you want to let that all go in one batch. But when the physical signs of the fermentation really slow down and pretty much stop is when it's ready to be used as a fertilizer.
So it won't usually smell as pungent when it's almost completed. That's a good indicator. And it won't be foaming or bubbling as much.
Because at the start it's quite an offensive odor, like rotten eggs or farts or something like that. It smells like, as it's giving off sulfur and methane. But toward the end it starts smelling a bit sweeter, like a compost.
Kombucha.
A bit kombucha-y toward the end. But once it's stabilized and the population of microbes isn't continually exploding and digesting and balances back off, is when it's really going to be beneficial for your garden ecosystem, because there's a lot of dissolved nutrients in the water, but there's also lots of really crucial anaerobic microbes that are really good in the soil. So using it as a fertilizer is also a microbial inoculant.
It's like a probiotic.
Like a probiotic.
And when you spread it out, do you need to dilute it or use it straight?
You don't have to. I think we do to make it go a bit further. It can be, you can water it on the foliage of plants. They can absorb some nutrients, or you can just do it at the base.
We also filter out the sediment and like matter that is left.
Yeah.
And we will just probably usually chuck that on the compost pile.
Yeah.
Because it will start to break down really easily by worms and things at that point.
Yeah, all the leftover solids, they still might maintain the shape of grasses, but like, for example, after a fermentation cycle, we've squeezed like a pumpkin seed that looked fine, but just goo came out.
Yeah,
like it had all broken down.
Yeah.
But we've thrown it on the compost heap and the worms absolutely love it. At that stage, it's just teeming with the microbes that worms want to digest. So we've put it through the worm farm at that stage. I've put it in a tote, and then I put plants on top of it, and it turned into a really nice rich humus. Because it's kind of composted but in an anaerobic way. Yeah, it's really good, and no weed seeds sprouted out of it any of the times that we'd completed the fermentation process.
Really good at dealing with that cooch grass. That's frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what on that? Are there any other questions or anything?
Any questions from Zoom?
Yeah.
Are you able to make your living?
Yeah, sometimes, but
depends.
Yeah, it's been hard because we had to move farm.
Yeah, that really set us back.
So yeah, we started from scratch, but it's going all right.
Yeah, now it is like a bit better. Definitely, it was pretty tight in some weeks. Living quite frugally. Yeah, it was definitely, if we were paying more for rent, we probably couldn't afford it. You have to apply for some other assistance.
Yeah, it is a difficult industry to be in because we're not practicing the most economically viable methods, but there's also not a lot of, I think, knowledge out there. Like a lot of the systems are still being discovered, especially in our climate and with our native species and in our local economy. There's a few market gardens around and a few sustainable growers around, and just kind of finding our place in that space. It's all part of the challenge, but
and only like 2 or 3 people can only do so much, really.
Yeah.
Very tiring. But it's although it's tiring work, it's definitely worth it.
Yeah, it's very fulfilling.
Definitely better for the mental health, I'd say.
Yeah.
Even with the financial struggle.
Yeah.
It still feels good.
I've described it like it sometimes feeling like being a starving artist, but you're not starving because you've got food.
Yeah.
You're not starving.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we've needed to buy like any of our own vegetables for a long time. Unless we don't like seasonally have it or anything. Yeah. But that's pretty rare that we even do that.
And we are only probably growing on under half an acre at the moment. So it's not an exceptionally large space. Like we put a lot of labor into it, but small spaces can be quite productive. And we are able to feed more than just ourselves. So it's kind of testament to how these principles and facilitating soil health can really increase the yield of and the overall health of a small space like that.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got no more questions from Zoom?
No more questions from Zoom?
No, just good on you guys for doing what you're doing, and
thank you.
Heads up to you.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Well, we might if I'll grab the microphone. Well, we might sort of start to wrap the evening up. Oh, sorry, yeah. I can't get used to looking at the camera. You know, sort of yeah, but no, that was a great presentation. Thank you very much. Yeah, and particularly from my point of view, because I've just got a small garden, you know, and I grow stuff in pots, and I'm trying to increase the soil fertility in my garden, and I have some successes, quite a few failures. Yeah, I think the one thing that my garden will grow at the moment seems to be pumpkins. Can only eat so much pumpkin, but anyway, they grow, so I let them go, and they climb up the trees and go over the neighbour's garden, and she didn't mind, so she had some pumpkins as well. But yeah, so thanks. You've given us a lot to think about. You've obviously put a lot of time into that presentation. That is much appreciated. It's great to see you here and to share your knowledge with us. And thank you for all our Zoom participants for zooming in. That's great. It's good to see you. And yeah, it would have been lonely without you. So thank you very much. And so we'll wrap up the Zoom, and yeah, and look out for our next activities. I think we've got a garden visit coming up in June. I know Jack will remember Graham and Kathy Stewart.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So they agreed to host a visit at their place. They're sort of getting right into the permaculture side of things now. That's going to be, I think, I'm going from memory here, around about the 17th of June. So just look out for the details on that, and should be a good visit. They're a very interesting couple, and it'll be interesting to see what they're doing now in their garden, because I know they've been working for quite a number of years on on the sustainability of their house, and now I think they're focusing on the agriculture. So with that, hope to see you there, and I bid you all farewell, and thanks again to Matt and Lauren. It was great. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.